Okay, hi. This is the video for Module 2, and for Module 2 you'll be reading Spring Chapter 2 and Diane Ravage's Chapters 4, 5, and 6. So, for Chapter 2, Spring goes into some detail about pre-colonial education in the U.S., and he is kind of giving you an idea of, pre-revolution versus post-revolution, because the next chapter is going to be about, after the revolution, how education begins in the United States as a new republic, that kind of thing. So he gives you some ideas about where the, impetus for schooling, any kind of public or societal schooling comes from. And that is obviously going to be from some European traditions, and those European traditions are often tied to religion. So obviously the reason for schooling to begin with, a lot of the time was to read the Bible, or to learn how to read so that you could pray, kind of a thing. And up until the Enlightenment, there were ideas about the nature of man, or the nature of humans. And until, and prior to the Enlightenment, it was pretty much believed, especially with certain religions, that, you were essentially, or humans were essentially bad and needed to be saved by God, and had, just different ideas about how religion and man interacted. And so, of course, if your ideas about the nature of the human being are that the person is essentially evil, it's going to be different than, or how you educate that person is definitely going to be different than if you believe that person is either neutral or essentially good. So after the Enlightenment, these ideas about the learner, about human beings and human nature start to change. And with that, of course, is going to come changes in how we educate children. Less punitive, more, truly trying to educate and trying to teach. So you're going to learn a little bit about ideas, the ideas of Ben Franklin. I know he talks about in Chapter 2, but I believe he goes into some detail about Locke, John Locke, and his ideas of, the tabula rasa, which is the blank slate. So children essentially start off as a blank slate, and that whatever we write on them, whatever we teach them, is how they will turn out. Not just teach them, but how we treat them. And so obviously that's going to affect how education is given, is carried out. And then, of course, you have Rousseau, who his ideas are more, human nature is not essentially evil, it's not essentially neutral, it's essentially good. So his ideas about teaching children and about education are going to be different based on his conceptions of how the learner learns. Anyway, so that's interesting to just understand that, over time, ideas about human nature change, and obviously it's going to affect education. I gave you a PowerPoint based on, it's really based on information from a different book, but it's very essential to what we're learning about in Chapter 2 and, of course, in Chapter 3. And it'll give you just kind of a quick rundown about Enlightenment ideas and social foundations of republicanism, these types of things. And of course, when I say Republican and Democrat or democratic in these types of contexts, it's different than talking about the parties today. I'm not talking about the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. I'm not talking about that. We're talking about the concepts of democracy and republicanism. And you'll learn about that in that video. I'm sorry, in that PowerPoint. Okay, so then we'll move on to, let's see. You'll move on to Ravage. Okay, so chapters 4, 5, and 6 in Ravage. Chapter 4, she continues talking about the corporate reforms, the market reforms that are based on privatization and standardization and charter schools and all of these types of things. But she talks about the language that is used. And chapter 4 is really interesting because she gives you kind of this rundown of, I think she just talks about the 20th century, but it's been going on for a long time. This, school bashing, for lack of a better word. She gives you detailed sort of histories of each decade and what reformers and politicians were saying, or the public were saying about education during those times. And I think what you'll find is that school bashing has been going on for a very long time. This is not a new thing, even though some of the corporate reformers would have you believe, oh, we thought schools were just dandy and great. No, nobody. There's always been debate about how we can make schools and education in the United States better. But Chapter 4 is a very interesting one for lots of reasons, but for that especially. Chapter 5 and 6, she starts talking about some of the claims and then what the facts are behind some of these claims. I think what she's trying to show you is that, there's always an agenda behind reformers and politicians' claims. I'm not saying the agenda is always bad, but obviously there's always an agenda. I have an agenda with this video. I'm trying to help teach you something. And hopefully that's not a bad thing. But she's trying to show you, sort of to pull back the curtain a little bit and help you understand that a lot of the claims in by educational reformers have their basis in many of the corporate reformers wanting to make money, I think is essentially what she's trying to say. And I don't know that she's necessarily wrong. I mean, did all of them start out that way? Did Bill and Melinda Gates think, how can I make tons more money? I really doubt that, considering how much money they already have. But, are they the best ones to be making these decisions? People who really don't have any kind of background in education. Bill Gates can come help me fix my computer any day, or help, write some great software, I guess. But, is he the best one to be deciding how public education should be delivered in this country? I don't know. And I didn't mean to pick on him specifically, but because there's a lot of corporate reformers out there and a lot of different names, but that's one of the ones I could think of. Okay, and then she talks about in Chapter 6 the facts about the achievement gap. And I think that's going to be really interesting reading for you because many people believe that, No Child Left Behind was legislated in this country in order to help solve some of the achievement gaps between certain ethnicities, certain groups of people in this country. And what we're finding is that they're not narrowing, these gaps are not being reduced, they are in fact, in some instances, widening. And that's kind of scary. So she talks about that. But again, halfway through the book, she's talking about all the claims and the facts, but then the other half of the book, she's going to talk about hopefully some of the solutions, what she sees as ideas that can help solve these problems. All right, so that's what you're going to do for the Module 2 work. Not too much this time. You're going to respond to the journal assignment, and then you're going to answer or respond to the discussion prompt as well. Remember, with the journal assignments, you're going to want to make sure that you answer all parts of the prompt. Please make sure that you think through your idea first. I know that I want the journal writing not to be such formal language as a formal essay that you might turn in, but it still needs to be formal in the sense that I want you to organize your ideas before you begin, and make it make sense. I think most of you understand that, but it's not supposed to be just this sort of free, what would you call it, stream of consciousness type of writing. It really should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. All right, so if you have any questions, please email me, and make sure you start looking at all of the assignments in the assignments folders. Make sure that you don't have any questions about those yet. Your first group assignment will be due in a few weeks. I want to say in 3 or 4 weeks maybe. I'd have to look at the calendar, but make sure you check on the group assignment folder so that you have an understanding of that. You can get questions answered quickly. All right, I will see you next module.